So there's a debate around, I think, fostering versus residential.
Fostering is a fostering household, usually living with a family, where residential care is living in a house of multiple occupancy that is staffed.
Actually, there's quite a few things we have very differing views on.
I, like you, didn't understand that fostering was a business.
The market right now is saturated with independent fostering agencies.
One of the things that a local authority is incredibly weak on, generally, as a rule of thumb, is advertising.
I don't see how it can return to its original format.
But it always boils back to me for the quality of care.
You're too child-focused, Karylle.
That one particular thing right there is categorically wrong and should be ended.
Welcome to Conversations That Care, the podcast brought to you by the Care Leaders. I'm Luke Rodgers, and joining me is Karylle Phillips. Episode 5, Local Authorities, Independent Providers and Placements.
Welcome back. Should we talk about the fact that we've come dressed like twins?
We can. Actually,
I think we should address it.
Well, the truth is actually you came dressed like this.
Thank you.
The second I saw that outfit, I said, hey, would it not be a great idea? I've brought exactly the same outfit by chance. I'm hoping that Levi or some other company sees this and they're willing to offer us actual clothing moving forward.
Do you know what makes me laugh? So for those of you who've listened to our previous podcast, when I talk about the story and my experiences of social workers in particular, I always talk about that social workers always used to wear denim on denim with Timberland boots. And so now here I am and here you are.
Yeah, you're a qualified social worker, so I feel like you've got the authority to wear this outfit. I'm purely just a fraud.
We look like a 90s band.
Yeah, best 90s band ever though. Karylle, what we're going to talk about today?
Everybody knows Luke and I chit-chat quite a lot and go into deep conversation. What everybody doesn't know is behind the scenes, off camera, Luke and I have already started some discussions. Actually, there's quite a few things we have very differing views on.
What don't we agree on, Karylle?
Are you doing that thing to me again?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything. Like we've got a list of topics. What I think we should talk about is something that maybe we don't agree on.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's that we don't agree on, but I think we've got different views on fostering.
Right.
And thinking about privatisation and in terms of both the fostering sector and children's social work in general, children's social care, corporate parenting.
Well, let's start with fostering.
Okay,
I mean, we're going to reading the whole list out of things and you're going to give it away.
Okay,
so
let's go.
Yeah, let's talk about, the topic that we'd actually put forward here was on placements, where fostering is actually within those placements. So what should we talk about when we're talking about placement?
Well, look, there's conversations that are happening up and down the country, and they have been happening for a while in terms of unregulated placements, the quantity and quality of placements. Are they meeting children and young people's needs? And also there's a debate around, I think, fostering versus residential. And I think there's pros and cons for both, and people will argue for or against and have different views. But I think really one of the key things that I think we need to get to at some point in this podcast is talking about the people that work within either of those settings, either the foster carers or the residential care staff, or support staff that work then in that space of supported accommodation for younger children or for younger adults. And so, yeah, what do you want to talk about? I know you've got questions.
Well, I feel like given the debate we were having previous to this
Should we share? Do you want us to share some of that debate?
You've already maybe missed another third dynamic there, which is the idea of private versus local authority placement. So that we also know there's lots of conversations happening at the moment about, privatisation of foster care, privatisation of residential care, and then that in comparison to local authority. So the dynamics in that space, I think, is worth us also digging into.
Go on.
Do you want to go there first, or I think we should go there last, because I think that's the one.
Let's go there first and let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
Only because I think people will be intrigued to know where we sit on this. And I think, just to be very clear, I don't know how clear it's been, or if you're a new listener here, in terms of my, I guess, my catapult into fostering. So when I started my social work degree 11 years ago, I graduated 10 years ago. So yeah, whenever it was, right? Back in the 00s. When I started that, I was absolutely dead set on, I think I've said this a few times, I was not going into child protection, I was going into fostering. And in particular, I was going into private fostering. That was, so independent fostering, right? That was my remit. And the reason for that was I had had such a positive experience with that final foster carer placement, and they had come from an independent fostering agency. Equally, my sister had had also an absolute exceptional experience. And so it started making me think maybe private fostering wasn't as bad as what I initially thought it might be, or it was new, and so I didn't really understand it, right? So I said, right, that was my goal. I'm going to go into private fostering. I had a placement whilst doing my social work course, and just quickly realised the business side of things, and it really upset me, if I'm honest, because I'm Karylle, right? So I'm child focused in any setting, and so being in a private fostering agency on a placement, I am social worker to foster carers rather than for children. And so, and the two are very different when you're in that role. Even though you'd argue, but you're both social workers, what difference does it make? Very different agendas in that respect. And I just felt like it was a business. I couldn't understand why we weren't getting rid of poor foster carers. I questioned what's that about. I'd sue all that business stuff, right? And profit. And it just didn't sit comfortably with me. And then I was all for, with you at one point, of retaining foster carers back to local authorities. But the discussion, anyway, that you and I was having a moment ago before the podcast started was around, but now what? Now, what's the space now?
Well, let's just go back a second, because you've just said you were with me retaining to local authorities, and I think that I want to kind of clarify that position from my point of view. I care about good quality placements for young people, number one. I care about those people in those placements, whether foster carers or residential staff or other, getting the right support, the right training, being properly paid for this so that they can actually live and maintain. Yeah. And that's my focus, that those two elements exist. That is my whole focus. When we say retaining at a local authority, my focus within that is stability and retainment. So if you've got a foster carer, no matter where that foster carer is, I want them to stay with that young person. So that's my view. In terms of this dance between local authorities versus private fostering agencies, for those that have known me and that have followed my work over the last 13 years now, will know that I started my career at a private agency. I, like you, didn't understand that fostering was a business. And I cannot fault or any of that experience that I had. Right. I sat amongst board of directors. Right. They taught me not just about the business of fostering, but about business. I had mentorship as a care leaver. I was supported. And through that piece of work, we set up the very first young person's ambassador role, which was a care experienced person, supporting in multiple ways within that organisation. And then I won an award for that piece of work. So my experience with independent fostering providers personally has been one that is great. Now, I don't have a problem with private providers or people making profit in children's social care. What I do have a problem with is if they're making profit, and it's terrible placements, they don't care about the children. I think there is also levels to profit. Agreed. For sure. But for me, my ultimate goal is it doesn't matter where that placement is, as long as that placement offers exceptional quality care for our young person. And that the people providing those placements are supported. I absolutely do believe there are organisations out there, like they are in any sectors, that are focused purely on profit. We see it all of the time. In residential care, in fostering agencies, in unregulated placements, where individuals set up businesses knowing they can make a lot of money out of this space, and they do. That one particular thing right there is categorically wrong and should be ended.
And that's the thing that for me that I really struggled with. Just for everyone's benefit, I didn't just stop there at that placement and go, right, independent fostering isn't for me. I did then go and continue to work for a few different independent fostering organisations. But you're right. And I think one of the key things for me was my catapult or push into youth participation and sharing my story actually can be traced right back to independent fostering agencies that were providing platforms for young people to come and train foster carers and talk and do all that stuff. So like you, that was my first experience.
What's the pro and con? Because just based on what you've said, just to kind of name a few, it seems like, the pros for having a foster placement, in a local authority is that it's localised, you're attached to the same organisation that's there for the child. There's all sorts of things. But just from what you said there's something about a local authority system is somewhat bureaucratic. And you and I have had these experiences with independent fostering agencies where we've been tasked to do something that isn't placements. It's something that's completely different. It's youth engagement. And they are not governed by the same bureaucracies of a local authority. So there is a lot more innovation that can be created.
Yeah, and creativity, spaces. Absolutely.
Yeah, whereas you don't get that within a local authority.
All I know is, and I can't talk on every experience because there are some wonderful people. My auntie continues to foster for a local authority, I believe. But my foster carers had both a local authority and independent fostering experience and are critical of both. Right. The reason they left local authority was purely because the support and the innovation that you just spoke about, and seeing that there was a service out there that was all for foster carers. Because I think part of this discussion, again, we might touch on this in another podcast, is around that the beautiful diversity of foster carers that exists. And of course, that diversity needs to increase. But just the different styles of parenting, the different abilities that they have. And sometimes that one set agenda doesn't fit for everyone, and their experience was that local authority fostering was a very everybody almost same-ish, and so there was no creativity, there was no innovation, there was no big events that were taking place. Now that obviously might have changed now, but I guess the reason why we were talking a moment ago and we were debating was because the market right now is saturated with independent fostering agencies, and whilst I'm not for it because of that profit thing, it sits really uncomfortably for me, I don't see how it can return to its original format. And equally, I don't know how councils would even have the capacity or be able to. And I think because of their agenda shift, and I don't know if it's a bad thing, right? And the reason why I say this is...
So just to confirm, it's worth pointing out to our listeners that not all independent fostering providers are profit making. They run different structures. So you might have a company that is set up in a way that's a limited company for profit. You might have a company by a guarantee that's got an asset lock, which means directors can't take payouts. And then you've got maybe a charity as well, which obviously everybody commonly knows. So it's quite a diverse space with different legal structures.
But still highly charging for the local authority in terms of that doesn't change wherever the money goes.
It's a hot debate, is that actually, because it's kind of like there is different costs associated with a local authority. So let's just say one of the things, we don't touch fostering when it comes to recruitment, placements, that kind of stuff. What we do at the Care Leaders is we're wholly focused on supporting individuals to develop entrepreneurial skills so they can set up their own ideas, projects and businesses. And we train people, which is the combination of lived and professional experiences. And we will train all foster carers, all social workers, all teachers, because they all support young people. So we don't have this bias about where they come from, nor do we want to get involved in that argument because it's not ours. But what I hear all of the time is that there is this argument saying that independent fostering providers are more expensive, which actually I'm sure they are on a weekly cost. But then do we then look at the savings elsewhere in a local authority? So I know that local authority recruitment strategies are really, really expensive, but really ineffective. I think we did some work with a local authority once and their conversion rate was 1%. So you've got this massive recruitment drive and a very, very small rewards, which is a huge cost. There is other costs associated with actually the from the point of putting an advert out to recruiting and supporting a foster care, which does require significant improvement. And I know lots of people are trying to innovate in that space, which you miss all of those costs out with a private agency. So I think it's hard to actually balance this up. And I think while the cost for a private agency on a week-by-week basis is probably more expensive than a cost for a foster placement on a week-by-week basis in-house, there are other things that we need to look at. But it always boils back to me for the quality of care.
Well, that's what I was saying.
Who provides the best quality of care for that child and that placement?
And that's
Ofsted. Ofsted are the...
But okay. we won't go into that but I mean in terms of who's quality on day to day, right? So my experiences haven't always been positive in private fostering, where, like I've said, I've raised issues personally, I've raised them, and it's met with, I'll tell you what it was met with, actually. I'll be open and honest here. And I just hope anybody at that time in my life that was in my life at that time doesn't feel that this is a blaming thing. But it was met with, you're too child focused, Karylle. Now, I've always carried that with me as a badge of honor, and I hope to God they still believe that, and I hope that still shines through. Good. But it didn't matter, right, Luke? Because then it meant, if I'm not there then, and that's what I battled with, because I was like, right, that's it, I'm done, I'm done, I'm out of here, I don't want to be here anymore if that's the case. That place is still operating, right? But there's no, so whilst you're saying Ofsted or whoever else will come in and quality assure, it's not quality assuring those things. So
they're the kind of, like, I suppose when you're running an organisation or you've got a culture within that, they're the kind of really hard things to, I mean, no one's going to sit down with Ofsted and say, oh yeah, we had a real problem with Karylle because she was too child focused. Right,
and she challenged us about the effectiveness of carers that actually she had a point on. But they had 3 children in placement, so if we lose the carer, we lose because we've got no other carers. Yeah. And it was that ball game of, and seeing it really frustrated me, right? Because behind the scenes, seeing that play with children's lives. And the frustrating thing is, sorry, Luke, 'cause I know you want to say something, but the frustrating thing, don't do that to me.
God, do you want to touch mine again?
In case anybody's just listening and not watching. I reached out to Luke and Luke reached out to me.
Good point.
But the frustrating thing was, and I get that this will come down to somewhat come down to my own lived experience, right? My own care experience. That it triggered me. Because I remember being a child in a placement going, this foster carer doesn't like me. And everyone, of course she does, Karylle. I know you feel, but of course she does. And knowing with all my might that they didn't like me, that they weren't kind to me, but I couldn't prove that. There was no evidence that I could gather to show that I wasn't happy there, and they weren't the match for me and I weren't the match for them, or whatever it was, but it wasn't a healthy placement, right? And so to be in that space as an adult now, as a practitioner now, and all these things, and to still see them games being played really wound me up.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say, when you've got a lived experience or an individual experience, it does create bias in a space. I mean, you and I, we both know that after our careers of sharing our stories and going around and saying, these are the things that we went through, these are the things that need to change. I think looking at placements and looking at this dance, I find fostering, for sure, is the space of most controversy. And for me, it always comes back to, like I said, what is the best placement for that child, and is the people in that placement?
Oh, we can go to residential if you want.
Well, but I actually just want to move to another side for a second and talk about things like unregulated placements. So what is categorically wrong, what is so unethical and just needs to end is this, and I was in one of them, is these unregulated placements where there is, 24-hour support, which are thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds a week. Right. To offer zero quality of care, unregulated care to young people. That needs to end. We need to ban that from my perspective. Like, organisations offering unregulated placements that are things like what I had at 15 years old, which was bed and breakfast accommodation. The 24-hour support was the owner of the B&B who was inviting the girls who lived in that B&B into his private quarters. To the point where one of the girls there, I won't go into the details, but we had to go to the hospital with her. Right. And that was my experience of leaving care. Now, that would have cost the local authority an absolute packet. That needs to stop. And I think that the cost to a local authority on that is astronomical.
And not just financial, right? We're talking the cost for everything. The cost of your life.
I was somewhat lucky in that, like, I had a bit about me. Social workers have called me resilient.
Streetwise.
Yeah. Down with the kids, But I just remember it vividly. But I remember moving into this placement. I didn't have a microwave, I had a kettle, so I'm making soup noodles through the kettle. My girlfriend's dad at the time bought me the microwave. The social worker's like, we must pay them back, and he was offended at that. The whole leaving care situation through that particular placement was a nightmare. And And I mean,
but there's children in care in unregulated placements who aren't on the edge of leaving care.
Yeah, I mean,
they're going into unregulated placements.
I mean, I think I was listening earlier about kids just being put in hotels and stuff. I can't remember where.
I hear some placements are on boats now and barges, and it's a scramble for any placement will do.
Yeah.
And look, I can't talk on, but the numbers, Karylle, of children entering care are increasing. That might be true, right? But if we've known this for so many years now, why aren't we already projecting the increase? Why aren't we already preparing for that increase rather than just waiting for it to happen and then scrambling?
In what sense? How do we prepare for that?
Because then we really think about, so that bringing it back in-house thing, or that preparing and making sure all placements are quality assured properly and not just Ofsted registered. And I don't mean not just Ofsted registered as if that matters, but let's be honest, we're in a landscape now where people will say, that's an outstanding place. And everyone will go, oh my God, it must be brilliant then. I can tell you from personal experience, professional, that doesn't make it brilliant. But equally where people go, oh, requires improvement, that must be terrible. And actually, certain places are doing really well and the changes that are happening are amazing, they're revolutionary and they're innovative.
I suppose, I don't know Ofsted as much, but I suppose what I recognise it from colleagues and obviously working in senior spaces in local authorities is that Ofsted sometimes, from what I understand, boils down to potluck, boils down to like
postcode.
What they, not necessarily postcode, but like what they actually look at. Because I suppose you can't look at everything. So
Agreed.
I'm absolutely sure there is certain parts or certain pockets of what's been regulated that are not falling behind. So, but I mean, I don't want to get into Ofsted because it's a huge topic. It's absolutely necessary in terms of like we need to have something that regulates the quality of care. But I often communicate Ofsted as like the in-laws. So when they come around, you tidy everything up. You know what happens. Right. You see it working in local authorities and other, and then kind of when they go like, So I think that there is a space for that. And Ofsted, that obviously recently have been under quite a lot of fire about stuff in schools and things like that. But let's stay focused on placements. And your point that you were just making was unregulated, and then we were talking about like in-house. I think one of the things that a local authority is incredibly weak on generally as a rule of thumb is advertising. So they can't advertise and recruit foster carers very well. A lot of the times I see things on the back of a bus. You get on at the front of the bus. So if you're on the back of the bus, you're seeing in your car, you can't pick out your phone in the car to take the number because that's illegal.
Right.
And if you are, then you're breaking the law. So what do? You go home and you Google fostering in Birmingham.
And then,
that's it then. And then the private agencies that are paying for the Google ads at the top. So actually local authorities are, in some way, through their recruitment strategies, offering free advertisement to private agencies. Would be, though, so that's just their recruitment in terms of in-house foster care. If we wanted to increase that, like they just need better recruitment strategies. But still, the same thing it comes back to for me is good quality care, well-supported placements.
And my question would be to anybody listening who is in local authority positions around fostering, do they even want to bring it back in? Because actually there's this misconception that they're paying so much and actually the whole sector's been flooded now with all these independent fostering agents. But actually, given what their corporate parenting responsibilities now look like, is this let's think about the NHS, for instance, right? I know recently, having been in hospital with my leg, dreadful experience, absolute dreadful experience from one place to the next, just not, you're calling a million times in the morning to get through to a GP, all of this. It's almost like when I went there, I said to everyone, it's almost like even though we don't want it privatised, right? We don't want the NHS to become a private organisation or organisations. The way it's at, you almost kind of go, do you know what? I'll pay my money. I'll pay my money for it to go private.
Will it make it better?
Well, and so,
is the question.
And that's it, right? And so,
will people's care in the hospitals be better? That's, again, it boils back to that sort of thing. I'm exactly the same. Yeah. I cannot get an appointment with my GP at all. They've got 1.4 stars on Google rating. I had to go in to talks, and they were like, "Oh, we don't usually do appointments at the desk."
Right.
So I just basically said to them, I don't have access to the internet.
Right.
And I had to say that to get this appointment.
Right.
And so for me, I'll be honest. I actually pay for private healthcare because I care about my health. It's the same price of a decent gym membership. And because I actually want to look after myself, because I know that I'm going to get the care that I need, so it's a choice, because I know from my experience of my GP, which is a real shame, because I really would love to use my GP, that's be well, but I care too much about my own health to feel the stress that you've just experienced as well, and going through that rigmarole where I'm like, actually, as part of what I want for myself in my life, just like a good quality gym membership, is I want to invest in my own health. Yeah. So for me, because it's better quality care.
But the question about private placements in general is it better? Well, we know it's not always, right? And that there needs some oversight, or somebody needs to be checking that. And how many do we keep allowing to pop up? Right?
Yeah.
Based on, but there's a demand. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if there's a demand, would it not suit then if the local authorities weren't this is all location dependent, right? Because some local authorities continue to do brilliant in-house fostering services, right?
You've got the same, like you've got good, bad everywhere, so.
But and so what I would be saying is, shouldn't or couldn't local authorities be working with, in terms of that collaboration, with their local private providers, and looking at, someone was talking earlier about, well, how could they foresee? Well, actually, if we already know you have a model here for recruitment that works brilliantly, and we're already investing in you anyway in terms of being some of our main providers for the children, young people in our care, I mean, it doesn't go hard to say I'm requiring. Go on.
That the private agencies in the local area support the local authorities to recruit their own foster carers.
And it's not even that they recruit them for the local authority. It's just that there's a collaboration here. Because if it's quality assured,
well, I mean,
we're investing in the local businesses, the independent IFAs. We already know for some local areas they can't go back in-house, right? But if it's already working...
So there is a version of that happening through, obviously, these regional fostering hubs that have come, I think, from the care review. So there is this kind of regional space now where they're trying to bring people together to... I don't know, if I'm honest, like I said, we just don't touch fostering because it's not our space. And like I said, our space is supporting entrepreneurship, giving people relevant training. So I don't know what that looks like in terms of the landscape. Is it between IFAs, LAs, or what that looks like? Quickly.
We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, so...
we said we'd be 30, let's stick to 30.
So between residential care and foster care. So let's just create some context for our listeners that might be like, let's say, what I call once removed or the distant cousins of children's social care. Yeah. Fostering is a fostering household, usually living with a family, where residential care is living in a house of multiple occupancy that is staffed. So that's how I would explain it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And I think for those that have been listening for a while know my views on residential foster care. I think it has its place.
Please do share.
I think it has its place, but I think it's often
sounds like diplomacy right now. Please do share.
I think there's a place for it, and I'm not completely sure what that place is, if I'm honest, because I flip between, depending on situations, that is it a space for more respite termed care, but then I'll hear from colleagues and people that I know in the service that go, well, actually, Karylle, we offer a small bed home and this is what we do, and da-da-da-da. I would still argue the consistency and level of care and how the institutionalization of that, and I get different people live in different homes, but I also see, just quickly, because I know the time's running out, you see not only but particular groups of young people going into residential settings, and then those supported accommodation settings, and that's my worry. We're cherry picking sometimes, or we're okay with them being there because actually that would be good for them and they've got all this going on, but actually I'm on the fence about residential foster and residential care, and I hope I'm not offending anyone. But I just think more resources need to be put into it. Maybe that's what it is. They're missing any attention. They're missing any of the extra training, resource, etc. And so, maybe that's what it is. But go on. Go on.
Yeah.
Cut me off now.
Well, I do have a view of residential care. It is a balanced view. I want to say that it's similar to the view of fostering. I know residential care space that is a charity. It's run by an exceptional individual that I know so well. It's award-winning. It really does make a difference for children's lives. So I know of one.
That's one.
Yeah, I know of one, so I just kind of wanted to voice that because, I'm absolutely sure the person that I'm talking about will be listening to this, and I wanted to actually just communicate that openly because, and if you was to meet them and know them, I absolutely know that you would feel the same. But an absolute anomaly in residential care. I do have a view, if I was just to put that one to side, about residential care
as a whole.
But unfortunately, Karylle, we don't have enough time on this podcast for me to share that. So we're going to bring this podcast to an end. And thank our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you.
Downloading or listening to wherever you listen to as Luke and Karylle, Karylle and Luke on Placements.